Hi, Adventures and LARPing fans. We're in Cahir Castle. We're at a real live castle. I really wanted to show y'all guys this. Chris and I are here because Adventures and LARPing wanted to send us out here. We're on vacation and thought we would send you to see a really live castle. It is being worked on, so we're not going to play around and we're going to be careful when we go in. But this was just a really cool archway that I figured we would show y'all guys.
Hi, welcome to Adventures in LARP, and we're going to start off our discussion panel today with talking about explaining LARP to people that aren't us. I'm Chris Glover. My other host is Matt Griffith with Sean Keys, and our special guest today is Lorelei Hutchinson of Colony Drop Cosplay.
You almost had
I'm never going to get that.
Who's going to have to drop colonies on you?
That's right. So it occurs to me that there are people in the world that don't know what LARP is. I know that I've had to explain it to some of my coworkers a few times. I've had to explain it at one point to my parents, and some people get it and some people just don't. How exactly do you guys explain LARP to those that are not us?
I guess I'll take first shot.
Go ahead, knock yourself out.
Pretty much the way I would go is just saying like they know D&D. Pretty much take that character, put it as yourself, and go with that.
You must have had a really long talk with your parents about. I joke. I've known Sean's parents who LARPed with me when Sean was, believe it or not, at one point Sean was tiny.
3?
Yep.
That's right.
I was about there.
Right. So live D&D is a good direction.
Mm-hmm. Sean touches on something I start asking people when I first. Have you heard of LARP? Okay. Do you know what D&D is? What is their frame of reference that I could start from? Have you seen what is that movie that came out?
Role Models.
Have you seen Role Models?
Or
They
Knights
seen
of
that?
Badassdom. Or that's a new one, but
Yeah. They seen either of those. I don't have to go through all the fiddly bits.
Yeah.
It's like that. So it helps to know what they do know first before going into further.
Yeah, I do know that you and I have been at a variety of conventions pushing our product for a good many years. And I know that when we started, people had come up and we had some of the weapons and we had the rule books and all of our paraphernalia, and we'd have to tell people it's LARP, it's a live action role play, and we'd have to do a whole lot more explanation. I've noticed though that as the years have progressed, now that when we go to conventions, whether it be a gaming convention or comic or just geek related stuff, we don't necessarily have to explain LARP anymore, at least to the geek community. And I think that even with movies like Role Models that was an okay movie, but not, I mean, it's an okay movie, but it's a movie. Mm-hmm. But I do think that that there's a greater push of LARP in the mainstream media over the years, so that people at least have some sort of a concept of what it is when we talk about it. I know that I've gotten quite a few odd looks from things like coworkers and stuff. Laura, let me ask you, just before we started taping here, you were telling us about explaining it to your dad, yes?
Yes, my dad is kind of a stereotypical crotchety old white guy. He likes motorcycles and beer, and he's never been happy with the fact that I was a nerd. When I told him I was having a cosplay wedding, he almost lost it. But I told him about LARP, and at first he was really on the fence. He was like, so wait, you dress up in costumes and you go play in the park on the weekend, like in the beginning of Labyrinth. Like that was my dad's thing. So you're Sarah, and I think he's imagining me in the park by myself doing this. But then I started showing him photographs from fighting, from big battles, from like Combined Realms War and things like that, where I'm actually in the pictures and I'm fighting. And he started to see it a little bit differently, only because I worked the sport aspect of it to him a little harder than I worked the costume aspect of it to him. He was like, I guess I get it. I used to take kendo as a kid, so sword fighting is something I've kind of done my entire life as a sport. So moving into LARPing, I kind of explained it that way. I'm like, it's kind of like kendo if you took kendo and cosplay and mixed them together and, you know, took out all the Asian, of course.
Right.
He still doesn't really get it, but he thinks it's cool that I go out and fight with the boys. Like that's kind of my dad's whole, oh, okay, you're gonna go out and hit the boys with sticks. Okay.
at my day job, my team was sitting around, we were talking about things, and the question came up, if you had one event or life experience sort of thing that you could go do, regardless of money and things, what would it be? And I said that I've always wanted to try the Canadian LARP Bicoline. That has thousands of folks, and some of the pictures and are pretty intense of what they're doing, and my team was, what are you talking about? This is some LARP thing, until I went and found a couple of pictures and sent it out to the team, and a couple people came back, okay, that's pretty cool.
Pictures speak a lot louder, I think, because as nerd culture has come up, we as nerds have constantly been seeking for that untapped nerd niche. Everybody wants to be different than everybody else, and LARP was relatively untapped until recently. I think it has a lot to do with the rise of cosplay, as from cosplay to LARP and back again is a very natural progression.
Are you suggesting we're the hipsters of nerddom?
Kind of. Well, you were, and then they made movies about you, and now everyone knows all about you now.
We're not cool anymore.
No,
we have the corner.
What LARP is now. But I think that's why it became so big, because I've been in the nerd culture for a long time. I started going to cons when I was 7 years old, and I've seen it go from this really abstract thing, trying to explain to people what a cosplay is even, and they're blown away, to a point where cosplay's on television now. People know all about it. And so the nerds that have been around the longest, we're always looking for that nerdier thing than all of those wannabes that are trying to, because somehow we got cool. I don't know how we got cool. I don't know about you guys, but I got the crap beat out of me in high school for being a nerd, and now we're cool. I don't know how that happened, but but like LARP is such a natural progression, but showing people the photographs of it, because in their head they're thinking old school, like, that we all have big stupid glasses and we're gonna go fight dragons. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But it's
what I got in it for.
I mean, and that's what I got in it for too. But I mean, when you're actually doing it, it's so much more different than the way TV and media used to portray us. And they're, lately they've been portraying us much more differently with like Knights of Badassdom and things like that. Again, not a very accurate portrayal. I would never do drugs while LARPing. That's a bad decision.
Very bad.
Very bad decision. But the pictures really help, because my dad is not a nerd, doesn't like it, totally on the fence. But when he saw pictures of me on a field with 50 other people, all in garb, swinging this giant battle hammer, like, he was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And for me, like, growing up as a nerd, playing World of Warcraft, D&D, ever since I was about a wee munchkin, it's like a natural progression. I played this on tabletop for so long, now I get to do it. And like you said, that's like a big thing. That was a big thing for me as a young person, to come up and do this. And as soon as I got into it, I really, really liked it. I wish I had more time for it, because cosplay kind of takes all my time. But
Something that occurs to me, you said explaining it to your dad, who is this type of person. It helps to explain what LARP is to different people in different ways. Yeah. So if you've got like the big, burly football player looking thug.
Really?
Wow. I'm going to tell him about LARP fighting and combat and martial arts and that sort of stuff, and I think I'll get a much more positive response than telling him about the princesses and poetry.
I'm going this way.
yeah. But when I talk to cosplayers about coming to LARP, I go about it from the costume angle, because they already are costumers. Look, we already dress up. What if we dressed up and pretended we were the characters as well?
Right,
But
or you
couldn't
find
that be
people
fun?
who are into theater and you talk about improv and acting, and it's got a lot of different aspects that are going to appeal to different people. So it's complicated.
It just depends on which group you're going for and which part they know about that you're going to portray into the LARP process. And that's the only way you can really just get them into it and let them see what the others are.
Yeah, I feel like if you can get them to the field just once, that's really all you can do. If you can get them to just come out and watch, even that's the best that you can do. That's the best way to get anybody introduced, is to actually see it happening. Because almost everyone I've taken who wants to just watch has ended up playing before the day is over. They're like, no, this looks like fun. Like, even the most straight people that you think wouldn't want to do this, everybody wants to put on a costume and be someone else.
There was a group that I played with for a little while that one of the girls in the group really liked what was going on, and she came out, she enjoyed it a lot, and she was kind of a social butterfly of her high school, and every Sunday before game she would call like a half a dozen people. Are you coming out? Are you coming out? Are you coming out? And I don't know that the whole half a dozen people ever showed up, just one or two here and there. But she would kept calling people, "You're gonna come out? You're gonna come out?" Trying to get more folks out. But I guess if nothing else, at least it explained a little more to more people and was a little more obvious as to what was going on and things like that.
Talking with Kristen Hammock, who isn't here, but we interviewed earlier today, she, off camera, she said, you have just a few seconds to make that elevator pitch for LARP, right? Because the attention span of most geeks or anybody really is fleeting. I think she makes a good point that you need to be prepared with that elevator speech ahead of time, have it practiced, know exactly what points you want to hit. And her explanation was, like what you said earlier, Lorelei, that I go out to the park on weekends, I dress in funny clothes, and I beat people with a stick. And it's fun.
It is fun.
And that's going to grab people's attention, if nothing else. And holding that attention now gives you an opportunity to say a few more things, get into more details. But having that elevator speech at the ready is probably pretty necessary.
All right. Well, this was a really fun discussion. I'm liking this a lot. But we are going to pause because we've got more show for you. So, more show. As I have said time and time again, we would love to hear from you. adventuresinlarping@gmail.com. Send us some info. Send us some suggestions. We'll talk about what you want to talk about. We'll have people on that you want to see on here. And in the meantime, stay tuned. More of the show to follow.
Ladies and gentlemen, when I'm out LARPing in the field, fighting all day long, my weapons will break down. Sometimes I get injuries, and that's when I call on Crazy Carl's duct tape. It's weatherproof. It holds up to the stresses and strains of a day in LARP. I can fix my weapons and my elbows and knees and get back out on the field as fast as possible. Crazy Carl's duct tape for all your repair needs.
Hey, welcome back, Adventures in LARPing fans. I'm Chris Glover with my co-host Matt Griffith.
How you doing?
Today we have with us the lovely Sarah Bowman, a LARPer, a worldwide LARPer as it is. So, I know you've been doing LARP for a little while because I've known you before we turned the cameras on. But you've done quite a variety of LARPs and things over time. Tell me a little bit about your experience, about what you've been doing.
So I started out, like most people, in vampire LARP, although a lot of people started in BOF or fantasy. And really that was the extent of my experience until I wrote my dissertation on role-playing games. It's called The Functions of Role-Playing Games. It's available through McFarland Press if you're interested. And then sort of people started reaching out to me, and I found out there's all different kinds of LARP out there. So I've been to the Nordic LARP convention about 5 times, where they do a lot of experimental types of games that are focused on a lot of times pushing boundaries and social awareness of particular issues. So I just got back from Denmark, and I played a game called Just a Little Leaven, which is about sex and AIDS in the 80s. So it's a very serious game, but it's also very passionate game, and there's a lot of intimacy and closeness, and then a lot of grief. So we all feel very connected to each other after playing this game. But it's a really good example of a game that can be both fun, however you decide to define fun, but also
Or
very
entertaining, at least.
very educational,
Sure.
because it sort of mimics the way that the AIDS crisis hit the gay community and related communities at the time, because there's a lottery of death at the end of the game
Okay.
every day, and so there's basically waves of people that are dying. So
Wow.
this is a little bit different than a lot of the mainstream LARPs. Not that there's anything wrong with mainstream LARPs at all.
Sure.
But so I got kind of introduced to that. I got introduced to Intercon, which is a really fascinating group of theater LARPers in the Northeast. I go to WeirdCon every year, and I publish their companion book, which is sort of scholarly and academic essays. And WeirdCon sort of aims to have some sort of scholarly discourse alongside different styles of LARP. So there's a lot out there, there's a lot going on, and so our goal is to sort of bring people together from all of these various communities and get them communicating and talking.
One of the things that I really like about some of what you're doing and some of the folks that you're interacting with is that we've Matt and I have done some various conventions and talked about LARP for a long while, and when we started we kept having to explain what it was, and now we're to a point where we don't necessarily have to explain what it is, but people, they kind of understand, but they have I think a more preconceived notion of things like the boffer LARPs because they see so much of it. And then when you look at that there is an entire community looking at it from an academic standpoint, it's kind of eye-opening to some folks that just I'm here to swing a foam weapon. What do you mean an academic standpoint? It's definitely like a whole another realm of, but still tied in with LARP, and you're still, taking a role and going with it. And I find that interesting, and I know that quite a bit of our audience may not even realize that it exists. And to that end, I understand that right here in Central Texas, you got something coming up next spring,
Yes.
May. What do you got going on?
May 19th through 22nd, we have the Living Games Conference, which is a sort of conference for both academics and practitioners to discuss LARP in all of its forms. The first one was run at NYU,
Okay.
and it was sort of smaller, so we're trying to expand. And basically, the idea is that we will play in the evenings and do social activities, get to know each other, maybe do some co-creative activities. And during the day, we'll have keynotes and panels and workshops, and basically do some more of the sort of sharing of ideas. And we also invite people if they would like to talk about their LARP. We have sort of 5-minute segments where people can come and give slides and
Nice.
kind of show about their game. So that way we all kind of know what each other are doing, because in a lot of cases, people are just sort of operating in a vacuum and they really don't have any idea of what's happening with other games. So the
Right.
idea is to sort of create a discourse between scholars, practitioners, designers, and just players. So everybody's basically welcome to come.
As over a wide variety of LARPs as well, yes?
Yes. So the kinds of games that we'll be running will have to be able to be run in a convention setting, so basically in a hotel, and probably 2 to 4 hour slots. But the emphasis is to use those games to be able to discuss them the next day, so in panels. So they use them to illustrate a principle. So we'll have a variety of different types of games, but then they'll tie into larger discussions that we're having.
Very neat, very neat. So you mentioned that there was a smaller one in New York before, and now we're having this one here. Why Central Texas, aside from the fact that we're here?
Well, I have been very active in the academic side of things for a while, and this is something that is very important to me and that I've been sort of pushing for. Also, we have Dystopia Rising here, so we have a very robust sort of volunteer community that can help out. So one of the things that we had to decide when deciding where it would go next is how many on-ground people we had that could help out. And who would be willing to help out. And
Right.
we've so far been very, very lucky. We've had a lot of people that have really been excited and wanted to help out in the local communities. Not just DR, also Planetfall people and
Sure.
people that are interested in freeform and all sorts of things. And so, I was sort of basically handed the task for this year, and I have an awesome team that's sort of all over the U.S. that has been helping. But next year, we're hoping that it'll move to another city. So maybe it'll be,
Sure.
at Living Games Toronto, or it'll be Living Games Boston, or we'll figure out some way to have it kind of travel. And this is mirroring the Nordic LARP convention, Knutpunkt, which goes from different countries every year. So last year it was in Denmark. This year it's going to be in Finland, the next year Norway, and the next year Sweden. So it sort of travels, and that
Right.
way all of the burden isn't on one particular organizing group. And so another one will sort of take up the reins, and also people
Right.
can explore different
And
parts
when
of
you
the
get
country.
to go visit, you get to go visit different places and interact in different ways there. I really like that a lot. Well, as it gets closer to that time, fear not, Adventures of LARPing fans, we will be trying to chat with as many people from this conference as we can, and seeing what all that we can bring to you if you can't get here.
There will be online content that people will be able to access.
Beautiful.
And we
I love
will-
online content.
Yes, and we're hoping to be able to have as much of a conference proceeding as possible. So if people write academic papers, those will become available. Or if people just do a presentation, their slides will become available. We're not sure exactly how much we're going to film, but hopefully we'll have at least some videos of the keynotes, especially.
Right.
And of course, you are welcome to come and do footage there as well.
Right. I want to show my people. It's not just swinging with offers. There's all kind of stuff. Well, I definitely want to thank you for taking the time to pop in here. We should have you back, and I'm sure that we will. Stay tuned for more from Adventures LARPing. Next time on Name That Smell.
Burning heart.
Hey, Adventures LARPing fans, I'm Chris Glover here with Dave Mesa, one of the folks behind the Devil's Bayou and one of the folks behind a Dagger Here group event called Forging Pangea.
Yes,
So
sir.
thanks for being on the show.
Thank you
first
for
and
having me.
foremost. Yeah, and you came prepared. That's always good. So I have been out to the Devil's Bayou before. I kind of know what to expect, but none of our followers yet know what to expect if they haven't been out. Describe what the Devil's Bayou is for us.
Well, your first thing would be it's a real treat. We have a complete medieval city, taverns, smokehouse, kitchens, little rooms to rent for people to stay in. We have a giant maze garden, about 6 feet tall, so you can run around and find each other and beat the crap out. See, I said it again.
It's okay. It's okay. So ultimately, the Devil's Bayou is a place that LARP groups can come and rent
Oh,
and
yes.
run LARP games.
Yes, we have
and
several
a
games
variety
out
of.
there, yes.
Lots of stuff going on at the moment, but really anybody with a LARP game can come on out and take a look around.
Everybody and anybody is welcome.
And you mentioned the town. Having been there before, it's almost completely constructed by pallets.
Yeah,
It's
we use-
amazing. And I tell you, from having been out there, I would think in my head, wait, a town constructed by pallets. Really, how impressive are we going to get with pallets? But until you get out there and you see that it's full on buildings, a full on town. And some of it you have to look close to realize that, yes, it's still pallets.
Yeah, it's 100% recycled materials except for things that we had to buy, screws, nuts, bolts, and
Right.
roofing. It's all
It's
recycled
green.
materials. It's totally green. Yeah, that's Austin
Nice.
for you.
Nice. And you mentioned space. So there is town. There is area outside of town. You mentioned a maze to go through. How big is it in total?
The property sits on 75 acres. We take about 40 acres for what we've got with battlefields, the maze garden, the city. We have a Roman fort that we can fight in, a nice little facade. We're working on showers, bathrooms, all that kind of stuff now too, which is nice.
And
So-
but you do have full-on camping there. I mean,
Yes, yes.
People do bring their tents and they can camp, and the tents can be a little out of the way so that you're not seeing nylon tents in the middle of your
We do
playing
set it
field.
up so that the tents are away from the battlefield, so all the good combat shots and have no tents in the background. The tents will be outside the city, much like a traditional medieval city where people would
Sure.
live right outside the gates. So that's how we're running it.
Nice. And I know that you have a bunch of groups going there. You've got some of the Planetfall folks that
Yes,
actually
sir.
came onto our show before, and you've got some of the Amp Guard folks that we've had on before, as well as Dagger here. And this event, Forging Pangea, tell me more about Forging Pangea.
When I first started doing Texas Dagger here, nobody fought anybody else. They had their own little cliques, and all it took was a swift kick in the pants to get everybody together on the same field. We're about to go into the fourth one, and it has been a great turnout every time. No drama, no BS. Everybody has a good time and fights, and then we all party. It's a
How
great
many
time.
people show up? To your last one, how many
The
people
last one
showed
was
up?
157, and that was the third one. It went from 50 to 75 to 150, so we're expecting over 200 at the next one.
Nice. And how often do they come about?
It's biannual. We
Okay.
usually run them in September and April since there's no Renaissance festivals in those months, so we lose a lot of our clientele, or not clientele, but our friends. If they're working at the Renaissance Fair, they can't be.
You're
at
running a
PNJ
business.
too.
It's
Yeah.
okay to say clientele. but yeah, if people are working at a Renfest, obviously they're going to be doing those sort of things.
obligation
And
every
those are
weekend.
good times of the year around Central Texas for those who aren't in Central Texas.
'Cause it's not
Parts of
hot.
Central Texas are a little warm. So yeah, but those are excellent times of the year. So you've either got fall where things are starting to cool down, or you've got things where late spring where things are not 100 degrees yet.
Yeah.
So those are some good times. And this is something that I like that it's an event that's a bigger event that has a place and it's not going to move around from place to place. I know when I first started with some groups and AmpCard groups and stuff a long while ago, let's not date me. There were certain parks that they would go to repeatedly, but it seemed like every time that there was a different group here and a different group there. And it all happened to be around the schedules of those different parks and those different organizations and things like that. And so it always took a little bit of time trying to figure out where you were going or anything like that. But once you've been to the Devil's Bayou once, you know where it is. And since it's aimed specifically at LARP groups, any LARP group that says, oh, we're at the Devil's Bayou, you know where it is, and you know that you're going to have LARPers there, and you're not necessarily going to have to stop and explain to campers, no, we're not sacrificing cattle here.
Yes, yes.
We're prepping for tonight's feast. And so, it's kind of nice that it's a place for LARPers to gather. How long have you been doing stuff with them?
About 2 years ago, we met and just hit it off, and they had a little start to the city, but it wasn't really quite what it is now.
Right.
So I was like, hey, tarps are cool. Wood is cooler. And so we tore down all the tarp city and started building a real wooden city.
Right.
And it works. It works as a shanty town for sci-fi LARPs like Planetfall. It works as a medieval town for games like Amp Guard and Dagger here. And the Gladiator Arena is definitely epic. We have big battles in there, and it's awesome.
Nice.
Love it.
For longer term fans of Adventures LARPing, if you've been watching us since the beginning of the season, there were Planetfall clips of the town. That's the town we're talking about. But it's even grown since those clips were taken.
Much bigger.
Definitely an excellent place to be. Well, I'm going to pause here for a minute, and I'm definitely going to have you back on the show a little later, and we will keep up with what's going on there. But thanks for coming on at this part.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll get back to you guys in just a bit with more on the show.
Thanks, guys.